In this video, I'm going to talk about drawing ears and pontificate about various things kind of surrounding that. So what prompted this is that I have this printout from an old sketchbook from 1981. I posted this on my Art Principles Instagram account, but I was intensively studying and still try to. It's kind of like background training, right? Like exercise. Everyone knows that in the gym, you got to go put the work in. It's kind of the same with drawing. Drawing knowledge, drawing practice. So this is from a sketchbook I kept back then. It's a page I printed out, and it's about the ear. The top, I've got sketches I did following a great old-time artist called Willie Pogani. And he did a breakdown on the structure of the ear, which I'm going to get into. I'll see if I can zoom in a bit here. And then I did my own version of it here. And what I did is I used projection lines just to keep it straight, which is a great habit when you're turning things. You don't have to draw like with projections in a sort of more technical or drafting style all the time, but it's definitely useful when you're learning stuff. To keep things straight, almost like in animation, you know, they use construction lines and stuff. So that was just a note to myself about angles and straights. That has to do more with style and noticing that this is in nature. And then these ones were, I got myself one of these drawing mirrors. Well, it's a drawing mirror for me, but it's I guess a shaving mirror, you know, cheapo. And so look at myself, or if you get two of them, you can create more angles for yourself. And I was drawing myself in an upshot, and I was trying to look at here how my own ear turned. So you could see the change in the forms. And that kind of gets into something I'm going to talk about here. I'm going to circle around this whole topic, but what you have is, when you draw, a foundational thing to understand is you have, I'll just keep this like this. You have what you can call the real world. So that's just like, imagine that's just things as they are when you walk around every day, reality, three-dimensional reality. And then you have, next circle, you've got your mental model of things. So without realizing it, the world exists inside us, doesn't it? I mean, we have conceptions of things. It could be your ideas. In the case of an artist, it's all your visual models that you have in your head. I've heard that some people don't visualize things. They just think in words. They don't think in words at all. And that's a whole thing about the mind that's very interesting, but I could get into that another time. But assuming that you're an artist that has visual mental models, you visualize what you want to draw before you draw it. We have little mini versions of the world built inside us. And not only ideas about abstract concepts, but ideas about physical things, like in this case, an ear. And then when you draw, what you do is, if you're drawing without reference, you're not looking at a life model and drawing them, or drawing your own ear in the mirror. But let's say you sit down to cartoon, you're a comic book artist or a cartoonist, you sit down and draw. You're drawing your mental model. So you've got, I don't know if it goes in that order, but what you're drawing is you choose and create your drawing final lines. So all I mean by that is the final lines you choose to represent whatever you're representing. And cartooning, comic book drawing, line drawing, it's a visual language. I mean, lines don't exist in nature, right? Think about it. There's no outlines on things. So we're using this symbolic language. Words are another kind of symbolic language, because words, if you write block letters like this, they're also lines, and they're just symbols. They're transmitting and communicating something, and we learn to decode them. But drawing is a different language. So then when you look at different cartoonists, you know, your favorite cartoonists, your non-favorite cartoonists, you see in any given thing that they have different ways of symbolizing the world. So let's take an ear. Some people draw ears, you know, and they just do sort of a vague thing like that. Let's say they're doing a more realistic-y thing. They'll just kind of do this kind of thing. And then there's all kinds of variations of that from different angles. But often what you find is that people just scrub in things that they think are more tricky, like ears. And there's no real structure, and there's no real form. And then, of course, in the cartooning world, there's very commonly also, like, if this is realistic, I'm jumping around here, but there's like a spectrum of drawing to cartooning. Am I still in frame? Yes. Over here, you get really cartoony stuff, like this would be the mid-ground, whatever it is, you know, semi-cartoony, semi-cartoon. You can put everything on a spectrum. So over here would be like the Mort Walker, you know, you just see that. The Beetle Bailey or whatever, something like that is very common. You just get the, usually like something rounded off, but it's either blank or you inside you get no real structure except maybe that or something like this or whatever. So that's different to me then. Those are final lines, and that's different than what I'd like to suggest here is go to the source, real world, nature. Study that carefully as you can. Try and see, observe, remember, like the famous artist cartoon school used to say. And then from there, you refine your mental model, and that's your memory. You add it to your memory, and then that can come out later because it's in your mind. And it's sort of the long cut is the shortcut is one of my sayings, because if you do this, people think, oh, that's really tedious, man. They start moaning. It's like, why do you want to do that? I want to just draw. And they approach this with perspective too, which can be a very confusing subject if you don't understand it. So they approach that the same way, like with an attitude of, oh man, that sounds really like a long way around. It's actually not, because if you think about it, if you bother to do a bit of this, it's a bit painful at first if you're not used to it, and you have to discipline yourself to go and do it. But once you do it, you save yourself a lifetime of all these like confusion and wrong drawings and like, oh man, redraw, scribble, erase, tear up, get frustrated, go drink too much, you know, I'm a failed artist, the whole thing. It's like, no, you don't have to do that. Just go to do a bit of study, and you know, you'll just save yourself all kinds of misery. So where do I go next? Okay, I'll talk about probably, which is going to be the title of this video, drawing the ear in 5 lines. So after looking at this Lily Pogani and looking at my own real ear and other people's ears, it's fascinating. I mean, you can be the art freak that walks around staring at people's ears, and then they catch you. They go, what are you staring at, man? Are you a creep? No, I'm just an artist. Believe me, I'm just an artist. I'm studying. And they're like, yeah, right. So the ear in 5 lines is my kind of simple boiling down of this. Are we in frame? Yes. And it's based on this. I won't go into these. Well, I'll go into the after. But, you know, there's technical names just like there are for muscles, for the parts of the ear. I'm not trying to recommend that kind of stuffy an approach, although it wouldn't hurt to know the names. But I realized it can break it down into 5 lines. And if you memorize these simple 5 lines, then you can draw ears. So there's the outline of the whole ear. And that can have different shapes of all kinds, which is the matter of variations when you go out and look at people. There might be ears that are, you know, longer, you know, there might be ears that are more square and they go right into, there's no real break to the earlobe going up. Other ones will. So that's the matter of the outline. But that's line 1. Line 2, I go like this. And that's called that's this line here. And again, you can see this on yourself if you look. And then line 3, I make one line like this. And this is, of course, with an ear just more or less flat to you. And this is what we're doing here is just learning as sort of a diagram. But it doesn't have to be dogmatic. You're not trying to like you have to draw this exact ear every time. It's a way of memorizing the structure. So that's 1. I'll put a little number here. 1, 2. I'm putting numbers at the terminator, the endpoints. This is just the way I draw them. I found it useful. 3. And then there's usually something like this, again with a lot of variations. And then there's a kind of substructure in there. So once you memorize that, you can use that in different angles. Like say you're drawing, let's go over here. So you're drawing more of a front view. And it'll be something like that. So that's line 1. Of course, you got to modify it for the perspective. Line 2. And then you'll have something like this commonly. And that'll get you in the ballpark. And then from the back, it can get tricky. That's where actually I'm gonna jump ahead here and say I've got my old friend ordered this from where's that place? And this is not product placement because I have no relationship with them. 3dtotal.com, but it seemed pretty good, except I like this model, except the head's too small. I guess they're making it superhero-y, but I find this head too small. But anyway, guys, good job otherwise. It's 3D printed, but let's get his ear up in the frame. So there's the structure. And then I'm thinking from the back, it gets tricky, but I'm looking here. And my 5-line model may break down a little bit, but I'm not going to draw it in exactly the same order. But might have to modify it a little bit because some of the pieces and lines do not show because they're being obscured because the form has turned. There's actually another line because this is where the ear joins, the 3-dimensional ear joins. But I'm going to jump over here and draw the earlobe. And it's kind of like that. Now that's not, again, following that's a little crappy, Paul, but it's not following my 5-line model exactly. But I think you get the idea. So you can remember, if you remember this, like I just remember 1, 2, 3, 4, and sometimes 5, but you don't always have to put that in. It depends on how detailed you want to make the drawing. Because if you're doing something cartoonier, then, well, don't bother. So again, I'm not making a plea to memorize an absolute formula. I'm more just talking about having something like this in your head and having looked at the 3D forms and memorizing it will really help you. Yeah, so it's a 3-dimensional form. And I'm going to jump on to talking about that so I've been talking about studying from life, learning to draw things from life, which I haven't completely done here, although I jumped into that a little bit from just looking at my model here. But what I recommend to anybody who's a drawing student and in this computer-y age, I'll zoom back a bit, go back to drawing from actual things with your actual eyes, not just on screens, not just on a layer on Photoshop tracing objects. Use your, I'm adjusting my camera, use your actual, just real space, real time, draw forms. And that applies to learning perspective. I'll show you some of my models, my old friends. They're yellowing and dusty, but this is one I made years ago. This is just from like IKEA, some kind of cheesy porcelain or ceramic balls they were selling. But for a sphere, I just marked off the 3 center lines in tape, which has now gone all yellow. It's a little bit off actually, but it still helped to kind of look at like, what do things look like when they turn, And the same for perspective, which I'll do in another video, but this is not a cube. This part is square, but this part is clearly not square. But anyway, and I need to make a square. I had one, but my old friend, the square, got crushed and died in a move. But you can study perspective and convergence. That's when, you know, the lines go steeper. Say like up here, they go steeper. I'm digressing a little bit off ears, but what I've linked it to is ears are a three-dimensional form. These are all three-dimensional forms. Learn to draw from studying three-dimensional forms. And then you can make up cute little things like this to help you remember later. This is Mozart. He doesn't have an ear. Mozart's lacking ears, but he's got his Mozart wig on. But he's good for angles, upshot, downshot. What's this strange object? It's balsa wood. Paul carved it many moons ago. 266 Adelaide Street West. I used to have a studio long ago. And I was getting really frustrated drawing the ribcage. This is not really in frame, but ribcage. So what I did is I made a three-dimensional balsa wood model. It's all scummy now, but like try and put it in camera properly. Side view, front view, you know, top view. So here you have the back. This gets into anatomy, but there's sort of a depression in your back. This would be the angle here, just in the side view of your neck, where your neck joins the mass of your rib cage, and these are be the ribs, of course. So it's a simplified form I made, which you can do, and I mean you can do it now, of course, in 3D models on a computer, in Blender or SketchUp or whatever it is. But again, if you make something in real life and just look at it and study it, I think that's really beneficial because it's of a different quality. You know, your own eyes and mind are looking at stuff. Here's the arm from Mr. 3D Total guy. What's it called? 3D Total, yeah. And, well, he's sadly lost his arm. Lastly, I'm going to make this a brief thing about, I get ribbed for always talking about Alex Toth, but we're back to Alex Toth, people. And this is like a book, The Best of Alex Toth and John Buscema, Roy Rogers comics. So going back to the beginning, let's look at ears. There's Roy in his ear. He's got 2 ears. But let's just investigate how Alex drew ears. I don't think that's Alex, that's John. And here's Toth. Probably early to mid-career Toth. And does the master know ears? Yes, he does. Look at that. I'll hold it up rather than zoom in. So three-quarter back view ear, very nice. He's cartooned it down, but it's got all the structure. Same here. If you can see that small. Let's see if we can find a bigger ear somewhere. Oh, Roy's got his ear. See, there's a structure of Roy Rogers. He's got his gun, his ear. Okay, here's a good one. This is more Toth. Oh, can't get it in camera. Sorry, folks. I'll find something else. Zoom out more, Paul. Here we go. I'm talking about this here. It's got all the structure. Now, of course, not done in 5 lines. I mean, I'm doing it just in sheer line to remember the structure. It's like a memory device. But if you get that in and the 3D forms drawn nicely, then, of course, you can add in rendering or lighting, which is going to change things. And that's kind of layered in on top. But if you don't have that in the first place and you jump right to doing all the lighting and inking and fancy stuff, and you're kind of confused about what's there, then it can just make a mess and make for frustration. Interestingly and oddly, talking about stylization, I don't know why Toth did this, because he's got realistic stuff, beautiful, fun inking, but for some reason on some of the ears, he just left out the interior parts. To me, it doesn't work. I mean, you can criticize your idols, you know. He's got like ear detail here, but then suddenly here it's left out. And it didn't drop out in the printing. He simply didn't draw it. I don't know why. Alex, wonderful drawing and storytelling, but he, I think, was working out his cartooning, you know, because you have some faces here that are much simpler and fun and cartoony, but they're not as completely realistic in the level of detail he's added as other people, figures and people he's drawn in some of these other panels. I guess these other ones, I'm looking for a front view. Yeah, there's a nice front view here of the ear. All right, well, you get the idea. This is, I guess, early John Buscema. Not sure, but I'll jump over to Wally Wood for a second. Someone on my YouTube comments was asking me about Wally Wood. So I love all kinds of artists, not just Toth. Wally Wood. So let's have a look at a deep dive, an ear check on Wally Wood. Let's see what Wally did for ears. Was he looking at ears? Oh yeah, look at that. Well, it's a little rubbery on some of it. But I'll find something I can zoom in on. I mean, obviously Wally Wood knew what he was doing. And yeah, I mean, if you look at this panel, clearly he's not just drawing random scribbles. He understands like the 3D structure of the ear. So I haven't done counter examples here, like people that I think didn't do it well, because we all at times have not done these things well. This is just my plea to understand the structure, maybe use my simple 5-line tricks, or come up with your own, come up with your own sort of, don't make up a different ear, but if you want to use a different way of remembering how to draw the ear or anything else, then find a way to put it in your own head and memorize it. And then when you're drawing, you will be progressing as you go through that earlier thing I talked about. From the real world to your mental model to your final lines, you'll find less frustration because your mental model will have been modified by looking at the real world carefully. And there's endless things to that. When you're walking around in the day, you can learn new things by using your eyes. Say, oh, I never knew a fire hydrant looked like that. You can be the freak on the walk with your friends where you go, oh, look at this fire hydrants, I never knew. And I mean, there's no end to it. Or you can do it privately. You don't have to externalize it and tell people. Do not tell people about your private drawing thoughts. All right. I think that's the end of this one, and more to come. And work on those ears. Bye for now, and thanks for listening as ever.